guys, welcome to the Save Continue podcast, where we talk about video games and video game related stuff. As always, I'm Shanae Howard, and with me is Tommy Shelby.
Hello.
And Ryan Robinson.
Hi.
So guys, I know we don't only talk about what we've been playing, but I had like a mini question for you guys.
All right.
Okay, I like this.
So, Tom, this can't be your answer, but I've been playing a lot of Legend of Zelda still, and I.
Okay.
No. I'm giving relevance.
All right.
And I keep just getting super impressed about just as we talked about like last time, like new ways to utilize the skills that I already have, or even like the tools or abilities I already have, and I've been trying to think of other games that really utilize all the skills and abilities you have, or that you build up with the character, where you're still using like old abilities, like where you're like the ones that you get at the set are still good and you still use them, and the new ones are also like good to utilize as well.
Yeah.
All right, now you can say now. Wait.
What are you asking? You're asking me to give an example of that I like, or what?
Yeah, like other games that y'all like want to give a shout out that you think that really utilizes a lot of skills well.
Okay, there's a fighting game that is not extremely well known called Fighting EX Lair.
Hell yeah, man.
And it uses this system called the Gogi system, which is basically like a deck building system that plays out as you're playing through the match. Right? But what's interesting about it is like you have your moveset, your character's moveset from the start of the match, but like as you level these cards, it basically enhances what is possible for you to do throughout the match. So, the first match of the game is played very differently from the second or possible third match of the game. And a lot of people really don't like that system. It's kind of like the reason why I like Street Fighter Cross Tekken failed, except I think it's implemented much better in this game.
And like, yeah,
and it makes it more exciting to watch, right? Like if you're watching that game at a competitive level, it's like the fight escalates, whereas 90% of fighting games, what you're doing in the first match versus what you're doing in the last match remains the same outside of maybe like meter,
Nice.
Yeah.
What about you, Ryan?
Just to paraphrase my understanding of the question, skills that I've gained in one game that have translated over to like other stuff. That was
No. Like a game that has like multiple different things that you can do.
Right.
But like, even late game, you're still using the whole skill set.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because like...
I try to think, and I feel like a lot of the time when a game gives me multiple skills, like it always feels like it just distills down to like 3 out of the 10 that I gained.
I think most games that is the case.
So it's kind of
that, or like you specialize at like doing kind of one thing. Like you see people playing like Skyrim, and they're like, "Oh, I want to play more of a stealthy character. I want to play more of a thing." So you don't really utilize all of it. When I thought about this question, I was thinking a lot about like fighting games, because that's obviously like, yes, you're building into combos, but you're still doing the same buttons that you learned in the first tutorial part of the match. So I feel like that was pretty. So I felt like maybe that would be cheating, but the game that you describe having an entirely different mechanic that I've never even heard of. That sounds really cool. That sounds
right. Or like Proteus, how like most first person shooters, you're going to use the pistol until you get something else.
Yeah.
But like Proteus, you're using that pistol the whole way through.
Yeah. I do think that fighting games is probably the most pertinent that I can think of where that happens. And I think that a lot of the time, things that I learned in one fighting game almost always translate to another. And then it usually always involves me like just building on the foundation of one concept and expanding it out to like a million different concepts, but like still maintaining like those basic fundamentals. I think basically like any fighting game that I was halfway decent at has probably done that for me.
I also think like a lot of like platformers or action adventure games are pretty like are better at it than a lot of like say RPGs or
Oh yeah.
like shooters just like by the nature of it. But also they tend to like, especially like older ones tend to try to utilize like what they can a lot. Like when I think of the old Crash Bandicoot games or Spyro games, like there's not like you get a whole lot. You can like boost them up, but you're still just utilizing them in different ways.
Yeah, but like whereas with the majority of RPGs, the skills you're using at the beginning of the game, you kind of immediately abandon for the next 100 hours after you find something better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like sometimes what you get is just a like boosted up version of that, which
Sure.
which in this like hypothetical or like thought bubble, like I'm not really counting as like getting a new skill because you're just essentially like scaling up with the enemies,
Yeah.
unless it's like something like a double jump or a triple jump, because then that makes like I do feel like that adds just obviously a different verticality rather than like Firaga.
That's just like a stronger version of the skill that you'd been using anyway. So
Yeah. But but this week
I like your
though,
little exercise though.
thank you.
yeah,
I just want to see top of the head.
Use my little noggin.
But this week though is actually a topic that Ryan suggested a while back, and I had it pulled up, but I closed it. About the evolution of horror games and like our thoughts on it and trends that we've seen like come and go, and also like about our favorite types of horror games or characters.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, do you want to give some thoughts first, Ryan?
Sure. So, when I was originally mentioning this, I was thinking a lot about games like horror games that I had played in like the early to mid 90s, and how those games kind of the mechanisms that those games use to kind of to scare me a lot of the time. As I got older, I realized that like the mechanisms that the later games used are like so much different. They're like a little bit more subtle now. Whereas I feel like, for example, there was a game that I played for the Genesis called Splatterhouse 3. And I remember the one thing that scared me about that game is that it was one of the first games I ever played that had cutscenes in it. And it scared me because these cutscenes were just so like for like 16-bit 90s hardware. The cutscenes like they were just rendered in such a way that like looked so real to me, and they were so like shocking that I remember that they would always just kind of jump out at me and scare me in like a very like clear and like very apparent way. Like it was a very obvious way that they were meant to scare me because they were just so graphic in their execution. And then later on, the games that kind of maybe not so much scared me, but more unsettled me were more subtle, right? They were usually like, instead of giving me like a jump scare, they gave me like, there's more like just like a tone and a vibe that like persisted throughout the experience. And it was just interesting to me because it was a transformation that happened over decades that I didn't notice as it was happening. But like when I stopped to think about it, it was like very clear. So I just wanted to talk to you guys about like your experiences with horror games, like way back in the day, or like as early as you can remember, maybe, and up to now, and like whatever games you've played up till now that were like meant to be like of the horror variety or meant to like unsettle you or scare you in some way.
So I think the first horror game I ever actually played was like that I recognized as a horror game is probably Fatal Frame. It's just kind of funny because I was playing like Fatal Frame about the same time I was finishing Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
So going from very Disney to something that was very like tense and scary.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always like I've always been a scary cat, like as far as like jump horror goes, or even things that are like really uncomfortably horror, like things like The Hills of Ice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just really can't do it. But like there's just something about Japanese horror that makes it a lot easier for me to deal with, because I feel like it deals more with like suspense and just one facet of like a human emotion turned into something else, rather than like Eldritch Terror, where it's just like the cosmic being, or like other jump scare horrors where it's like, oh, like for my life is on the line. Not that there isn't like that, but I haven't really played a super lot of them because it doesn't appeal to me, because I'm just like, oh, I'm just gonna get scared and stop playing, and I'm gonna be too scared to go around this corner. I get scared in games that aren't supposed to be scary. And then anything like Dead Space 2, like as well. Like I did play obviously that, and that is like jump scare horror. And I was just very tense playing it. I do think it's a great game. I do like think as far as like jump scare stuff goes, it's more palatable than like other stuff. But even now, like I read a lot of or play a lot of like visual novels that are psychological horror, and I've played a couple like horror Otome games, which there's not that many. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
A lot of them just take out the romance and it just becomes a visual novel. But there's like some that are really good. Like there's one called Dark Knights. It's on Steam, and it's like people in the town are going missing, and you come across these like different, they end up being the love interests, like mysterious people. And I think like that's a really interesting concept. But as far as like that goes, like things like Five Nights at Freddy's and a lot of like the survival horror genre as well, like just does not appeal to me. Like I'll play like Stick Together with Birdo, but or Don't Starve Together. That's what it was.
Don't Starve Together, yeah.
And that's like, and that's supposed to be like a horror survival, but it's just a survival. Like it doesn't really.
It's not scary.
It's not like I wouldn't really consider that like a horror survival.
Yeah. I kind of feel like when we were younger, horror in video games was much more subtle than it is now. Like
Resident Evil 7 wasn't subtle?
Well, no, like Ryan's talking about, like, you know, there was more jump scare stuff back then, and I feel like there's just as much now, if not more. When I think about like older horror games, you know, I think about like stuff on the NES, which was supposed to be horror games, like Friday the 13th and shit like that, right? Which was just not scary. And I think it was harder to do then. You have examples like Sweet Home, which really birthed that genre, but like we weren't playing that, you know. But like I think about like games like Super Metroid, which I don't know, a lot of people don't consider Metroid to be a horror series,
right?
But I think if you look at games like Super Metroid or Metroid Fusion or even Metroid Dread, there are elements of horror in those games. Especially Super Metroid, like that game starts with you finding a bunch of dead bodies in a Nintendo game, you know, and you have like these impossibly huge monsters, you know, and like I always thought Metroid was pretty scary when I was a kid, but like,
do you think that was like, by design, or do you think that was just the effect that it had on you?
No, I think that's by design. I think like people don't look at it that way because at that point, you know, with 16-bit graphics, we weren't really thinking about how things could be scary, right? What did we have? We had Castlevania, we had Ghosts and Goblins, you know, but like that's really it. But like if you go, you know, early 2000s or like mid 2000s with games like Lone Survivor, which were intentionally made to look that way, but were also very fucking scary, you know. I think it can be done with that style. I think it's just not what people were expecting, especially from a company like Nintendo.
Yeah.
I think it's very hard to look at Fusion or Dread and say that there isn't supposed to be some scary moments in those games.
Because Fusion's the one where are they both? Because Fusion is the one where like the other Samus is hunting you, right?
Yeah. But like, if we think about when the genre really kicks off with games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, I think still to this day, the first Resident Evil is the scariest Resident Evil we've had.
Like without a doubt. Without a doubt.
But like, and like people like to say like Konami was just trying to jump on that bandwagon with Silent Hill. I think Silent Hill is a very different franchise from Resident Evil.
Yeah.
And I think the horror in Silent Hill is much smarter.
Mhm.
It definitely scared me a lot more. Like I had no problem continuing on with any of the Resident Evil games I've played. But like Silent Hill, I had to like force myself to like get over some scary spots, especially like the nurses or in like going into certain bathrooms. There's like a couple times I've just threw my controller. I was like, I did not like this. I can't handle this. But like, everybody,
it just makes you think more. Like there are things from the early Silent Hill games that like I will still think about from time to time, and not so much with Resident Evil.
Mhm.
And then I had brought up House of Leaves like last episode or the episode before, and like Silent Hill does that. It does like impossible environments, right? Like things that should not make sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's really neat. I think a lot of that is lost in modern AAA horror games. I think nowadays our horror games are very much jump scare oriented, and if they're not, they're really more psychological games than horror games, right? Like if you think about like Senua's Sacrifice, there's scary things about that game. I don't know that I would consider it a horror game.
Sure.
Though.
Yeah.
I feel like the best horror games we have now are indie games.
Yeah. Well, and like I was thinking about your comparison of Silent Hill versus Resident Evil, and I think that there are two things I think that set those two franchises apart like very distinctly, and one, I think that the things that are scary in Silent Hill are they're more like symbolic, and they're more like the things that are scary in Silent Hill are like more human, right? Like there are things.
It's like Jacob's Ladder or Evil Dead.
Yeah, right. And I think that like with Resident Evil, like the things that are scary about Resident Evil are like very on the nose. Like that's a monster, and like that's a monster. It doesn't represent anything. It's just a fucking monster, right?
Right.
But
but you have the people that made the monsters that are the real monsters.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But
we
like
were the monster all along.
Yeah.
That is Resident Evil.
Surprise.
But Silent Hill is like definitely very like metaphysical, metaphorical, like as far as like what the horrors like are meant to be.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also what helped like me finish any of those games, is because like it wasn't just like scary, but also like I needed to play these games because all my friends were playing this, and I couldn't talk about it if I didn't play it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I also think that like the way that those two games use sound is very different as well.
The sound designs. Yeah.
Well, like with Silent Hill, I'll start with Resident Evil. With Resident Evil, like you'll hear the sounds of like something walking around, or you hear a zombie groan. But the way that the environment is set up, like you have a pretty good idea of like where that threat is coming from. Whereas with Silent Hill, like especially when you're like in the open environment and like there's fog all over the place, and like you just hear that radio static start to pick up, and you're like, I have no idea where this fucking monster is coming from.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really scary like thing, because you're always like kind of like you have this dread as soon as you hear that static kick in, like you have that feeling of dread, and you're like on your toes because you don't know where that threat is going to come from. But with Resident Evil, like it's usually coming at you from like the opposite end of that hallway.
Yeah, and with Silent Hill, right, like you're like you hit the nail on the head there, Ryan, in that like there is that tension there, even though like Silent Hill isn't even real survival horror, because like you're not gonna run out of ammo, you're not gonna run out of health, but like
It's
but it
action
still
horror.
makes you feel that way,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Whereas,
But-
like, the horror of Resident Evil is, oh shit, I only have 4 bullets.
and like the entire premise of Resident Evil is predicated on the idea that I might not have enough shotgun shells to take down whatever boss is going to come up, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with Silent Hill, like, there's always a way to, like, there's always going to be a way to, like, take down, like, whatever enemy you're facing, but, like, I think Silent Hill is more predicated on the idea of, like, I don't want to see that thing in the first place. So
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what got me with, like, Fatal Frame, because it's not like you don't even have guns or bullets in Fatal
Right.
Frame. It's literally just a camera.
the camera obscura.
But you can still defend yourself, though. You know, I think a lot about the decline, at least for me, the decline of modern AAA horror games. I think it starts with Amnesia: The Dark Descent, where, like, that game was fantastic for when it came out, and it was extremely original for when it came out.
Didn't Alan Wake come out after that?
And I believe it came out after that. Yeah,
Didn't y'all both love Alan Wake?
I love Alan Wake, but those are very different games. And I don't know that I would consider Alan Wake to be horror. You know, I know Sam Lake is, like, trying to make it sound like Alan Wake 2 is a horror game, which maybe it is. But, like, you know, like, Amnesia: The Dark Descent really was the first, not the first game to do it, but the first game to do it successfully, like, from a monetary standpoint and a popularity standpoint. It really popularized the, hey, here's a first-person horror game where you can't defend yourself thing, right? And then we started seeing the Outlast and the Alien Isolations and the Layers of Fear, and, like, one after another after a fucking another. And I just so sick of it at this point, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, like, that's, like, the whole for me with Outlast specifically, the idea that I could not defend myself is kind of like where that thing fell apart for me, right? Because I think that a big part of a horror video game, and I mean, I feel like this is true to an extent to all video games, but I do think that a big part of a horror video game is, like, some kind of, like, a real sense of immersion with it, right? And one of the things that breaks my immersion is the idea that, like, this guy wouldn't, like, if backed into a corner, wouldn't throw a punch to save his own life. You know what I mean?
And I get what you're saying, but, like, that never bothered me in the early days, right? When you think about the first games to do it, like, Amnesia comes to mind and Silent Hill Shattered Memories comes to mind, right?
Yeah.
And the whole pitch to those games was, like, all you can do is run.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And at the time, it seemed like such a novel idea, because it was, you know? But, man, I feel like they just fucking laid into that idea. Like, everybody was doing one of those games. You know?
That brings to mind, so there was a series that I got really into in the 8th grade, called Clock Tower. Tom, you might be familiar. Shanae, you might be familiar with that.
Yeah.
And, like, the idea of Clock Tower, right, is predicated on the idea that, like, when you see the Scissor Man, you're gonna run away from him, right? Because, like, he's got that giant pair of fucking scissors. Yeah. You're gonna run away from Edward Scissorhands every time you see him. Which, like, in real life, if I saw Edward Scissorhands, I'd be fucking terrified. I don't know why people love that guy so much. But
it gives a good hairdo, you know.
Yeah, but, like, one of the things, and this is where I feel Clock Tower succeeds for me, where Outlast doesn't, is in the way that, like, you're not going to go toe to toe with the guy, right? But, like, they give you implements of different kinds to kind of, at the very least, slow him down or incapacitate him in some way. And that made the horror in that game so much more real to me, because, like, I'm, like, he's in this room with me and I'm hiding and I'm looking for things that I can interact with to throw him off or give myself an extra few seconds to get out of there. And that heightened, you know, that feeling for me in those games, in the way that, like, in Outlast, I knew that, like, if a guy saw me, then I was just gonna turn tail and run away and hide under a bed or hide in a locker or something. Like I knew that was going to be what the course of action was every single time. Whereas with Clock Tower, like depending on the room that I'm in or depending on what's around me, like there are ways to defend myself, but like while still being kind of defenseless, there were still ways to like, fight back, which made it more real to me and made it a more successful horror game for me. But people like Outlast, and everyone forgot about Clock Tower, but I remember it. But that's what it is for me. Yeah. That's true. We are old. But
I will say, I know there's like a couple others. I just never got into them. But I really did like what Doki Doki Literature Club did. As far as like the fourth wall breaking, turning into like a horror game when you're playing like a nice like cutesy romance game. I mean,
yeah, and it was free.
And it was free, which is amazing because actually like pretty like, especially if you're not expecting it. I mean, there's a reason why people made so many reaction videos of people playing it.
Yeah, is
because like it's unexpected. It's so different than what like anybody really plays as far as like Western games.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, there's actually I mean, as far as like other horror visual novels, as far as the story goes, I would say it's also just due to like translation stuff because I don't really know much about the production of that game and like how much of it was intended to be in English. But I do know that like there's other games who do very similar stuff without breaking the fourth wall, but the way that you save, the way that you quick save or quick load can affect things, and sometimes it'll turn it into terrible things where characters are realizing that they're like reliving moments, and it's written much better than that. But I really am glad that like at least it caught on as popular, like, and got popular for a hot second, because like visual novels can be a lot more interesting than just reading.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like if you look at the games in that genre that like pitch themselves as horror, I don't find many of them to be scary, even the ones that I think are good, right? Like the Nonary games, everyone loves 999 and Virtue's Last Reward and all that. And
I say
like,
those are horror.
But like, but clearly they're supposed to be, Like 999 is directly influenced by the Saw franchise, like, but like,
which the Saw games were also not scary. Just putting that out there.
Right. But
Ryan, there's no sound coming
whether or not a game is scary doesn't like erase the intent of the game. So it could still be a horror game, even if you don't find it to be scary.
In that case, there's a lot of games we can call horror games that aren't actually like that. Nobody calls horror games.
Well, sure. And it's a lot of it's an opinion thing, right? Like I don't consider Splatterhouse to be a horror series by any means, but I'm sure a lot of people did.
Yeah. But like,
some of them do have like some of the visual novels though do like it's suspense psychological suspense is like my thing that I like, and it is able to provide it like a plenty as far as that goes. And even but yeah, like now thinking about all like the most recent horror games, like none of them are AAA games that I like have enjoyed or liked. Yeah. Say even like the last 15 years, really, since Dead Space 1.
Yeah, I mean, I like PT. I was genuinely scared of, but that turned out to not be a game ever.
Yeah. The idea of it was pretty scary, I guess.
If mobile games count as games, that demo counts as a game.
Yeah, sure. But I think about like the Dave Szymanski game Iron Lung, which oddly enough is being made into a movie now. But like, you're in one little room that whole game, and you don't actually see really anything. But that game is scary as shit, Or like Lost in Vivo, which is very Silent Hill inspired, but like, man, that game is tense,
Yeah.
And like I think about what we have now, and like Friday the 13th, the game, or like fucking the Evil Dead video game, like all that shit just feels like hide and seek. You know, like I don't know, man.
You know what? Actually, I play Phasmophobia every now and then, but Berto plays it pretty somewhat regularly, and I have friends that play it still to this day regularly.
Yeah.
And I mean that one, some of it is jump scary, but like I think as far as like cooperative horror games, it's definitely one of the better like ghost catching ones.
Sure, but like to both of our point, like I wouldn't consider Phasmophobia to be a AAA game. You know? No,
I mean I don't know who made it.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to like speak that it wasn't.
So a question I have, and Tom, since you're more like inclined to play horror games, this is more aimed toward you, but Sinead, feel free to answer too. Has the type of horror that you're like attracted to changed over time, or do you still feel like you're still looking for, like when someone says horror, you feel like you're still looking for the same things to get out of it?
I mean, I think it's definitely changed. When I was a kid, it was like, yeah, jump scares and monsters were just right, you know?
Yeah.
If I played, like I played Silent Hill when it came out, and it wasn't, like, it was scary,
yeah,
but not for the reasons I find it scary now.
Right.
You know? And the things I found scary about it back then, I don't find scary now,
right.
You know? But, like, yeah, absolutely that's changed. Resident Evil scared the shit out of me when I was a kid.
Sure.
It doesn't, like, at all anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that was a waste of $5 for me when I rented Resident Evil 1, and the first time that zombie turned around and looked at me, I turned the fucking game off. And I didn't play that game again until I was an adult. But
I remember the shareware version of Doom scaring me when I was a kid.
Yeah,
and I sure as hell wouldn't consider Doom a horror game now. You know, but
yeah.
So
I mean, I've already said before, mine's basically stayed the same. I'm still a tiny marshmallow, just like I was as a child.
So, Sinead, if someone was to say, like, if someone was to ask you to pick a horror game to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there is a certain, like, a specific kind of horror game that you would gravitate toward? Like, I know that there were some visual novels that you played that were horror themed, but like outside of that, do you think that there are like specific themes that you would maybe gravitate toward or maybe shy away from? When choosing one?
I guess like definitely the more cerebral ones. Mm-hmm. So like things where it is more like Silent Hill, where it's manifestations of certain experiences or traumas or feelings. Right. Things like that are definitely going to be the things that I go for. Like, so somebody like battling like the Babadook, which is like the manifestation of her grief.
Right.
Like that. Like it's gonna, those are the things that I would go more towards if I'm just playing it and like, hey, someone's like, hey, play this game. If I am playing with people, it's gonna be more like jump scary stuff, because that's the stuff that like I can't really I don't really do well with on my own. But also it's really hard as far as like video games, in my opinion, as a cooperative group thing, to like really enjoy the story, because everyone enjoys it at their different paces, Mm-hmm. So that always like takes me out of it, of like trying to also gauge where they are with the story and what they're doing. Or like some people like skip cutscenes and stuff like that if you're playing like online games.
Yeah.
Or
that's like me. I didn't get any of the Borderlands 2 story, you know?
Yeah, I know. Like same thing. Like a lot of the story, I mean, not that there was much of the story in Borderlands 1, but I was also playing it like with somebody and also by myself specifically, so I could read the things.
Right.
Go read that note. Do those things. So if I'm gonna play in a group, like if someone's like, "Hey, play a horror game with me," it's gonna be something more like Phasmophobia.
Yeah.
Or Resident Evil.
Yeah.
If it's something that like I'm gonna play by myself, it's gonna be more in line of like Fatal Frame, Silent Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know what I will say, Ryan, is like, as far as modern AAA games, I think like it can hit really hard when like with writing and acting, more so than it used to, because like if you think about a game like Returnal, Returnal is, you know, moment to moment gameplay is just a fucking third person shooter, you know?
Right.
But like that game is very horrific.
Yeah.
That story like sticks with you, you know? And
I've
Go
heard
ahead.
people say it's cosmic horror.
I mean, I guess, sort of.
I-
You know.
I mean, I didn't play it, so I don't
Yeah.
know.
but
So I was
like,
just getting y'all's opinions on what I've heard it described as.
Yeah, but like it's it's not a game that I think most of us would consider a horror game. It's certainly not through its gameplay.
Yeah.
But like that game reminds me of games like Silent Hill, where like I will remember that story and I will think about that story, you know.
Sure.
And it is a horrific story, you know. Or like, what the fuck was the name of that game? Fuck, I really liked that game. It's like you're sitting at different terminals doing different things.
Subsurface Circular.
No.
Fuck. I know it.
Hey, from your description?
Fuck, I know what game you're talking about.
Yeah. I can't remember the fucking name of that game, but like, you know, first you're sitting at like an old like Amiga playing a text adventure, and then you're like at this weird computer station doing like a different like lab experiment, and like the game feels freaky, but you don't really know what's happening until the very end. You realize that it's just about driving, you know. But like, fuck, that game's creepy as hell, you know.
Yeah.
And like the story of that game will stick with me, even though the name of that game will not.
Yeah, it's bothering me because I know exactly which one it is, but so I was thinking about it, and a lot of the games that I like, you know, I'm like you, Tom. Like when it comes to like horror stuff, like I want stuff to jump out at me. It's got to be fucking violent as hell because that's what I'm looking for, right? But then like
Stories Untold.
Stories Untold.
That's right. That's what it's called. I knew. But so I don't know. Like nowadays, like when it comes to like scary stuff, like it's more like stuff that is like kind of like whatever the thing is, it's just like on the edge of knowing, right? It's just like you can't quite describe it, but you know it's there. For example, there's this game that I played pretty recently called Darkwood, and the game is basically you're in this forest, and this forest is slowly being overtaken by like some like presence of some kind. And it's just like kind of consuming everything, and you're just basically trying to find your way out of the forest, right? And every night you have to go back to your cabin because it's dangerous to be outside at night, but they don't ever tell you why. There's just something out there, right? And stuff like that is like always like, it's so interesting to me because like the idea of like this unknowable thing that maybe I might not ever see, like that is so much more engaging and interesting to me as opposed to like 20, 30 years ago, like I need to see the scary thing, right? I need to know like what it is. And now like I'm actually more entertained like not knowing what it is, right?
Even like, you know, even if it's not the monster, right? Like even if you see the monster, just like things that are not completely explained, right? Like like Control or Play Dead's Inside, right? Like they're not really horror games,
but there's something definitely scary about them, right?
Yeah.
And that was
unsettling.
Like Inside is actually a great example, right? Because there was always the thing about Inside is that like all of the imagery in that game is just like, it's very off-putting, you know? Like there's like a lot of like really creepy shit happening. Maybe not stuff that is like just outwardly scary, but there's a lot of creepy shit happening. But one section of the game that will always stick with me is there's a section where you get access to a submersible, and there's this very fucking creepy there's very fucking creepy long-haired girl in the water who is always trying to get you, and every time the light is not on her, she will try to get closer to you. And it's just like, I was terrified of that girl. I was so terrified of that girl. But it seems like that where it's just like, I don't know what her fucking deal is, right? I don't know what she is, but like
I don't want to know, but I want her to get the fuck away.
It was so fucking scary. But that's part of what was so scary about it, right? Is I don't know what she is. I don't know, like, you know, I don't know anything about her, and that was kind of what was so scary about it. I also another recent example. I haven't really talked about this game on the show very much, but there's this game called Dredge, right? It's
Oh yeah.
so I don't know if you've heard of this game, Shanae, but like it's basically a game that takes place what I believe to be like maybe the early 20s or late 1910s, where you are this fisherman and you go out every day, you catch fish, you go back and sell them, but like they're like you need to make sure you're back at the docks by nighttime, or like that's when the fog settles in, and they don't tell you why that's a bad thing. They just tell you like the fog's coming, so you don't want to be out on the water when the fog settles in. And
so
like
the game's just waiting for you to fuck up and get caught by the fog.
See, that's the clever thing about it, right? Is because like time only passes when you're moving or performing some other action, right? So when you're reeling in a fish, like time is passing by, and like you're out there fishing, and like before you know it, it's like sundown, and then you're like, oh shit, I'm really far away from the docks, and then you're trying to get back to the docks, and like the fog is rolling in, and like you have your little light on your ship, and then like it starts to blink out a little bit. And it's just like that kind of stuff is just like so effective for me, because like I don't know why they want me back by nighttime, but I know that something's out there, and it's just so effective. Because if I knew what it was, then like it's like, yeah, I want to get back, but it's like it's not as scary because I know what the thing is. But like it being like just on the edge of knowing, and like the fact that like nobody will, every time someone starts to tell me what it is, like they kind of just like try to change the subject, like that stuff is just so fascinating to me. And I think that now I'm more, when it comes to horror, I'm more into things that are like not
peripheral.
Yeah, like just like on the edge of me seeing what it is, and just like not exactly explaining to me, and letting my imagination kind of take over as to like what it is I'm supposed to be avoiding. And I've settled on like I'm more interested in things that are like just like consistently creepy as opposed to like abruptly scary. You know what I mean? And like games like that like are more like my vibe now.
And I still like just like in your face jump scare stuff from time to time, you know? Mm-hmm. But I think about it with games that like I go back to, because like that's only going to work on me that one time.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, I've played Inside many times and I still think about that game, you know?
What? Yeah. Have either of you played, it's like I see a lot of the same crowd who like Five Nights at Freddy's, like, Little Nightmares.
Mm.
They're very different games, but I enjoy
I'm saying like they're both games I haven't played, but like a lot of people that like say like, oh, I like this game. Well, no, like they normally tend to be people like, oh, well, I also like this one.
Yeah, to me, Little Nightmares is like you know, like Mom's like we have Inside at Home, like, and it's that's Little Nightmares, you know, like it looks very impressive, right? Like the animation of that game and the character models of that game are more detailed than anything Playdead's ever done, but like those games don't have the depth of Playdead's games, either one of them, you know.
I know, like, I think it's a sequel. There's like a screenshot I've seen of one where like you're going down like a hallway and there's all these hands coming out of the walls. Yeah. And that's unsettling, because that also reminds me of like the Labyrinth movie, because a lot of those puppets were just either borderline or just very unsettling.
I think that what I like about Little Nightmares is kind of like the same thing that I liked about like part of the later sections of the movie Mother, is that like I really like things that like feel like this feels like a dream that I'm in, right? This feels like a really fucked up dream, and I'm always fascinated by things that have that quality, because Little Nightmares feels like you're in like a literal nightmare, because like the proportions of everything and the way that everything looks, it feels like you're just like stuck in this like fucked up bad dream and you're trying to get out of it. And that's what I like that about Little Nightmares, because it is kind of very reflective of things that like I personally find scary. Five Nights at Freddy's was never scary to me because I never figured out how that game worked. So I didn't.
For me, Little Nightmares feels very much like they had a bunch of ideas and no intent behind any of those ideas.
Yeah.
Like, let's just put a bunch of random shit in this game. None of it means anything.
Yeah, there's no cohesion in that game, really.
Yeah. And but they want you to think it's deep. They want you to think it means something.
Right.
You know? But I don't buy that.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Yeah. I think that, and I think
still enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I still enjoyed it.
I think that Inside has like a more consistent like theme throughout. Like there's a more like everything fits together. They make logical sense the way that they're set up. But I think Little Nightmares, and I mean they could argue that it's by design. I don't know, but it feels very disjointed. Like it feels like a series. Like I think that I misspoke when I said that it felt like a messed up bad dream, because I feel like it actually feels like a bunch of bad dreams like stitched together in a way.
It's your dream journal animated.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. I think it's just, and like, I mean it could be argued that it was by design, that like just it's in the name, it's plural, it's a bunch of little nightmares that you experience. But like, you know, I think that lack of cohesion though kind of works to that game's detriment in a lot of ways. Whereas with like a game like Inside, it's just like it's a consistent feeling of like this dread that I'm trying to outrun at every turn, and it's effective for it, you know. And I also think actually the way that game looks is actually makes it more effective, right? Because I think that things are more scary when they're not as explicit.
Sure.
And I think that Little Nightmares is like things are rendered in a way that like it makes like the things it's spelled out for me, right? Well, what that thing that is scary is, it's kind of spelled out for me.
Whereas, right, long arms are scary. You know, right? It's like okay.
Yeah, but like with Inside, it's like the way that things are rendered with not too much, like just enough detail for me to know what these things are, but not exactly to know everything about them. I think that's so much more effective. But I think that's just me getting older and my taste moving more toward being drawn toward things that are scary but like not explicit.
Yeah. Five Nights. I think Five Nights is like, it's very impressive how much money that they know how to make with that series.
For real.
They got children into it. So.
Yeah, but like I don't know a lot about it. I always had the idea in my head that it was kind of like a Night Trap, but maybe I'm wrong.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
no idea.
I know it's like a survival horror, and that's like really about it for it.
But it's like you're controlling security cameras, aren't you?
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting to me in that that's the only horror franchise that I can think of that is commonly associated with children.
Yeah. Remember there like used to be that old game back in the day, old Flash game. I think it was like a maze or something like that. And when you finish the maze, like a scary face would pop up on the screen.
Yeah,
like that's Five Nights. In my mind, in my uneducated Five Nights mind, that's what Five Nights at Freddy's is.
Sure,
you know.
Well, like
it's they took that idea and
because let's see when I hear the concept of that game, like my mind is just like, okay, so what's gonna happen is I look over this, like what's gonna happen is I'm gonna look over this camera, and then I'm gonna look over this camera, I'm gonna look over back at this camera, and there's gonna be a face in front of the camera, and then like the cycle will repeat. Like, and again,
I might be completely wrong.
I could be absolutely, I could be way off base with that because I haven't played enough Five Nights at Freddy's to know, but I feel very confident in saying that at the very least, that's exactly what that first game is.
I own one of them, never played it.
Yeah,
but yeah.
So I don't know.
It's like my kids for a very short period of time were into that Hello Neighbor. You guys know Hello Neighbor?
Yeah, I know that garbage game. Yes, I know Hello Neighbor.
But like, why is that any more garbage than any of those other first-person hide and seek fucking horror games? You know?
Yeah. Well, I think the concept is sound. Honestly, I do.
Yeah.
But I think that playing that game is just not fun.
Sure.
And like, I think that if that game were more entertaining to engage with, like from a control standpoint,
Yeah.
I think that it would be easier to get into it, but like that game is just, it just feels so fucking obtuse all the time that it's
Yeah.
hard. It just takes me out of it because I'm like constantly like frustrated with the controls that I never have that moment where like I can actually get into like what this game is trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So,
But I think like there's a good horror idea waiting to be tapped into, you know,
Mhm.
like for modern big scale, big budget video games. I think like it's only a matter of time
yeah.
before
Well, it's
something awesome comes along, like something fresh comes along, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But
So to like help me try, I mean, I guess it's not necessarily fresh, but I know like Signalis has been like pretty popular last
it's
year.
so good. So good. But like again, indie, you know. But yeah, very good.
And then one of the games we talked about also has had a recent sequel too. That's also like a survival. Well, I guess it's not recent.
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that I think are good games, right? Like all the Resident Evil remakes and even the new Resident Evils. And like, you know, we've got the Alone in the Dark thing coming out and all the Silent Hill stuff coming out. Like, I'm excited about for all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'll think any of it's scary,
Yeah.
but like, it's horror and it will be, I think most of them will be good, you
Yeah.
know? The Dead Space remake I thought was good. I didn't think it was scary, but I thought it was good, you
Yeah.
know?
You know, honestly, so I actually thought like, and I don't know like what other people's opinion is of this because I don't actually give a shit, but like I actually found Callisto Protocol to be like legit scary.
Yeah.
And I think that it was scary because partially because of what I felt like I was expecting and, you know, what it turned out to be. And also like, I think that, I think it was also one of those times when you have Hollywood talent in a game and like their skills as actors actually like really paid off to like sell me on this thing. And I thought it was scary in a way that I feel like Dead Space was scary to me in a different way, but I feel like this game was scary to me in that like these enemies are like always like right on top of me. Right. And like I'm always like frantically like swinging this fucking stick around trying to get them to back off me, you know?
Yeah.
And like it was effective in that it always sold you on like how physically exhausting it is to constantly fight off enemies with an implement like that as opposed to just shooting them.
Yeah.
And like feeling like it's very scary. The idea of feeling like physically exhausted when like 10 cannibalistic fucking monsters are like descending on you, that's very terrifying. And I feel like that game like does that really well. And I felt like it was one of those times where like I was playing this game and I was like, I would absolutely fucking watch this movie if that's what this was.
Sure. I almost feel like I would prefer it be a movie.
And honestly, I think that it would. I do think that having played that game and like gone through it in the way that the story progresses in that game, I do think it actually might have been served better as a movie.
Yeah.
But playing through it, I think that it was very effective in what it looked to accomplish.
Yeah.
I think it was distinct enough from Dead Space that it very, very easily stands on its own.
Yeah.
That game is fucking scary though. I found that game to be very scary, like 90% of the game.
What's the real name to the Dead Don't Ride video game?
Days Gone.
Days Gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish that one would have been a lot scarier because like it would be fucking terrifying in real life to have a mass horde of zombies.
I
after
played
you.
so little of it that I don't really know if that game's any good or not, you know?
I'm not saying
Or
it's good
scary
or
or
not.
not. But
Yeah, I'd say like not scary from like everything I watched of
Yeah.
it. Like,
I
because I just like I don't know. I just wish it would be I don't know necessarily how to implement it, and I haven't obviously played a whole lot, so maybe like just a bit, or I haven't played it. I've just watched it, so maybe I just don't know anything because I haven't played it.
Right.
But it just doesn't feel like tense the way that certain other zombie games, like even like Left 4 Dead, feel like. And I feel like if you're gonna have hordes, it would be the scariest of all. I'd rather fight one bloater in real life than a thousand.
I think that Days Gone is, it has these moments where it is really effective at scaring you, or at the very least like ramping up tension in a really entertaining way, because they intentionally keep ammo scarce, right? So you always have to like pick your fights and everything. But one of the
lay the traps.
Yeah. I think when it does it best is those moments where you are where you get discovered by a freaker, and you're just far away enough from your bike to where that shit's kind of scary, a kind of a scary situation to be in. And so you find yourself like hoofing it back, like just fucking hauling ass back to your bike when there's like
cops.
When there's like 15 of these motherfuckers chasing you, and then like getting on your bike like just in the nick of time, and then like turn the camera around to see these fuckers running after you. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And I don't have a feeling that like that rush ever really goes away. But there are times in that game where you realize how easy it is to exploit these fucking idiotic monsters. And then like the more you do that, the faster like the horror factor of that game like diminishes. Just like, it was like, oh, these guys are just fucking idiots. I'll just keep luring them over this bush and shooting them in the head.
Look, when you're giving that many NPCs individual AI, it's probably not that great. You know?
These buffoons.
But like when that game does feel tense, it does it really well. It's just, it doesn't happen often enough.
So I was thinking, you're talking about Callisto Protocol, and whenever I think about that game, I'm reminded that it was originally a spin-off of PUBG. And, I think about PUBG a lot in that, like, I never really loved it, but from a gameplay standpoint, there was a couple of times playing PUBG where I was kind of spooked.
It's a fucking horror game.
Where I was kind of spooked. And then I'm thinking, like, Ryan loves The Purge. And like, they should just make a Purge. They should just make a Purge battle royale.
How is that happening?
The idea disgusts me.
How does that?
But I think
how has that not fucking happened already? It is amazing to me, Tom, that a USA series was greenlit before we got The Purge video game, and I think all the groundwork has been laid already.
Right.
Like, you could do it.
You know what to do.
You know what to, like, right. I think also
it's like, it also just is another reason why you can shoot other humans and other human shaped things, which games always are looking for stories, and why that would be the case.
Well,
so this is perfect. Gives you a reason. There's a reason.
I think that was part of what bothered me about PUBG is that a lot of the time,
you saying it scared you. I remember that.
Well, yeah, it did scare the shit. Okay, so Shanae, listen. One time, Tom and I were like, the first time I ever played PUBG, Tom was sitting next to me. And fucking dude was in the fucking bathtub, and it scared Tom, and then Tom yelled, and it scared me.
So the guy in the bathtub didn't scare you. It was Tommy. It was Tommy's fault.
I don't think it would have scared me as much if Tom didn't like react to it.
I like how you put the qualifier as much.
It still would have
while still trying to blame Tommy.
But like that was as like my like first actual experience with battle royales, like a lot of the time the criticism of battle royales is like, I'm running around for 15 minutes, nothing's happening, and then I see a guy and then he kills me. And I'm like, that's what's great about them. That's what's effective about them. Because this whole fucking time, like, I'm hunting some guy, and at the same time, another guy's hunting me, and being hunted is fucking scary. And but like, I think one thing that one thing that kind of always bothered me about PUBG is that it lacked context. Like, I was like, what's going on here? Like, why are these guys in this plane? Why
we are at the whims of the rich and famous. This is just like Hunger Games.
But like they don't say that, and so like, but I need someone to say that.
They implied it. They implied it.
What's the announcement that comes on? Like the annual purge announcement that comes on.
See, that's the thing. Like that, the purge would if it was the purge battle royale, then I know what the deal is. It's 7 o'clock and until 7 a.m. anything goes. It's the forever purge.
Do you think that if the purge existed, Uber would like do promotions where it's like an extra purge tax on deliveries?
Actually, I think that there would be an Uber driver who would risk making deliveries during the purge. I do think. Yeah,
but like I said, but as soon as they open their door, you just kill them.
Sure, I don't have to pay.
Take their food.
Crime's legal. Give me my McDoubles.
Well, I'm saying like the driver would also just like try and murder whoever it's delivering to. Really, it's just creating the scene for a murder for somebody.
Yeah. That being said, I don't know what of the Purge battle royale would be that other battle royales aren't already.
It would be a lot of civilians that just are not equipped. Like in the same way, you probably have a lot more variety as far as like the types of people, but you also like starting different areas, like starting it at like a work office or things that like you'd see in a city. Yeah. Which everything now, like even if there are buildings, it's always like abandoned shit.
Yeah.
Ethan Hawke's there.
Yeah, he's there with his family.
Yeah. So somebody found some like masks. Like it's fine. Somebody's
like, I'm just saying, like it's a good IP for it. The gameplay can be at times scary already.
Yeah.
Right.
Being hunted is scary.
But I don't know that we've had. I'm sure we have. There must be a horror based battle royale. I'm not counting like DayZ or anything like that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But like, if you're building environments around horror and implementing gameplay mechanics around horror, I think it could work. Like I said, the idea of that just really does disgust me. Like, I don't want that, but I think it could work. Yeah. I think it could be successful. You know.
Let's write letters to all the video game studios.
Yeah,
that they will surely
Nintendo.
read.
And then also we demand a cut. It'll go out well. I'll make it happen.
But you know, like I like the idea of, because like so much of older horror games, it was based around the gameplay mechanics, right? Like that's like we said, that is what made Resident Evil scary.
Yeah.
For the most part, right? I like the idea of a game being scary based on the way that you play it.
Yeah.
I would like to see a return of that and not be hide and go seek, you know?
Yeah. And like, but
I'm really good at hide and go seek. I'm terrible at everything else.
Yeah. But like, that's the thing too, right? Is that like games like Friday the 13th or Dead by Daylight or whatever, like those games, like, I don't know. It's just part of like what's not scary to me about those games, and this is dumb, but like it's another guy who's also at his computer, and I don't get like, it's not like, I don't know what it is. I don't know. It's just like that's
the scariest enemy of them all.
Oh yeah,
we discussed this.
Sure, the guy at the computer. If Twitter is to be believed. But yeah, I don't know. It just, but also like, those aren't really scary to a point. And that's why like I just don't engage, because like honestly, like by and large I find those games so fucking boring. They're just so boring, and like the concept just doesn't even work for me.
But look, they make a lot of money, so clearly we're wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm not saying that they're bad games. They're just not they're just not scary.
I'm not saying that I'm wrong, but
I'm wrong like 90% of the time. But but different things scare different people, right? And there is somebody who plays Dead by Daylight who is fucking terrified every single match. So, whatever scares
Is there any? Oh yeah, I was gonna say, is there any games that we haven't talked about that y'all wanted to bring up, or any other points before we end the show?
No. Okay. I would say this, right? There's been attempts at horror in genres that we don't typically think of as horror that I feel like don't really fit. Things like Darkstalkers. I love Darkstalkers, right? But the game's not scary. It's not. It's just Street Fighter, right? It's not.
It's a Street Fighter. It's Street Fighter at Halloween.
Yeah, but like, I would love to see a fighting game actually be scary, or a racing game actually be scary, or something like that. Like, let's try doing that.
I feel like Twisted Metal almost got there a couple times. It almost got there a couple times, but.
I'm just thinking of a haunted car, so it's just essentially Christine.
One of the cars was haunted.
It's essentially Hello Governor.
Hello Governor. Yeah. Like so one of the this isn't ever gonna fucking happen. It's never gonna happen. But I would love to see another Manhunt.
Oh yeah, that's not going to happen. Not anytime soon.
Yeah, but I would love to see another Manhunt, because I feel like there have been so many like different ideas thrown into like this, like the collective idea pool, that I think that something like really terrifying could come out of a new Manhunt game. And I thought that conceptually that first Manhunt game was actually like, that's a really scary concept. I just think that the execution was kind of like not always consistent. But I think that like as an idea, Manhunt is like really scary. So I would love to see like at some point in my life another attempt at that.
But yeah, I got nothing. If you're too much of a baby for horror games, that's okay. So am I.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to let us know any of your thoughts about horror games, or your like changing perspectives as you grow up, or any games that we haven't mentioned here, we do have a Discord that will be linked. We also have social medias and YouTube if you want to see our beautiful faces. We're on most podcast apps if you're thinking about changing to a different one. And bye, guy.
Bye.
Bye.